Anthony Richardson, in very small sample size last year, did look like he was making some improvements. Certainly for me, I thought it was going to take half a season for him to look like an NFL quarterback, and that actually wasn't the case. He had some moments and certainly started to shine a little bit for them. As we head into this season now, he is coming off of injury. I do think maybe there's just a little bit of an assumption that he's just going to pick up right where he left off and all of that. And like, that gives me just a little bit of pause here for this Colts team, because it's like, yes, he was good in spurts with what we saw, but we had such a small sample size with Richardson.
We did. Yeah. And look, I know that there's some excitement here. The fact that, hey, we finally have Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor together. You did not have that all last season. However, that takes time to develop a little bit of a chemistry between these guys, because Jonathan Taylor, look, you're not paying him $14 million for him to have, 13, 14 touches a game. He's got to run the ball. You got to use him in the passing game. Anthony Richardson, certainly, I think, he showed flashes like, man, this kid, God, what an athlete and what a rocket for an arm, but not exactly the most accurate passer from what we saw in a 4-game sample size. But the offensive line still a little bit shaky. Look, Quentin Nelson's still good, but he's not what he was, I think, a couple years ago. But he still has to anchor that line. Ryan Kelly, the center, has been back and forth on retirement. Braden Smith's missed a bunch of start the last 2 years on the right side. So this offensive line still needs a little bit of work, and they really didn't add a lot in the offseason. They added in the draft, but that means you're very young on the offensive line. They re-signed Michael Pittman. That's good.
Yes.
Adonai Mitchell, who they drafted out of Texas in the second round, finally gives them a speed guy at receiver that they haven't had in a couple years. Josh Downs from North Carolina, I thought, had a very good rookie year. Alec Pierce, he's kind of the guy on the hot seat right now. He's got to produce because they drafted him in the second round a couple years ago. But I think offensively this team's going to be good. My concern, Matt, is on the defense, especially in that secondary. And look, I don't love the scheme anyway that Gus Bradley runs. They run a lot of zone. They don't blitz at all. They don't really disguise coverages. They're trusting that front four, which is the strength of the team with D-Buck, DeForest Buckner, and also Grover Stewart. Kwity Paye as a pass rusher, Ibukum as a pass rusher. Now they add Latu out of UCLA from the first round. They'll get to the quarterback, but can they do that enough to protect that secondary? Because that secondary, look, they gave up an average of 32 points at home in 5 home losses. In the NFL, even with this higher scoring, you give up 32 points, you're going to lose. And that's what the Colts did. And I just look at this secondary, and boy, does it scare me a little bit, even though they re-signed Kenny Moore and he's a veteran. But Kenny Moore is a slot corner. Right. He's not a guy that's out wide. So they need Juju Brents, who was their second-round pick last year, to kind of be a shutdown corner. But there's a lot of youth in this secondary, and I feel like they can still get beat for big plays.
Yeah, it was interesting, I guess, for me. And like I said, I just look at this, and I don't think that this team is going to be horrible by any stretch of the imagination. That's not what I say. But I just believe that when we look at this division and it's, plus 105 on the Texans and it's plus 275 on the Jags and it's only plus 310 on the Colts. I mean, to me, I think there's a bigger gap between the Colts and the Jags than what the price indicates right now. And it's sitting at 8.5 wins. Wes, I did play it a little bit on the under here for this team. And it's mainly because you start to look at this schedule and it's like, if you don't bag some of these wins early, then you come on the back end of this thing where it's like middle of the pack here is Buffalo, then you Jets, then Detroit, then you get Denver, and you close out with Jacksonville. You wonder where Tennessee's going to be by that time of the season. You wonder what's going to be going on with the Giants. Those look like they are certainly potential wins, but who knows? Maybe Will Levis is good. We don't know. We'll talk about them in a little bit as well. And the Giants, maybe they make a move with all of this. So I start to look at the schedule. You got to get some wins early, got to get some late, because that middle part where you're going Miami and Houston and Minnesota and Buffalo and New York and Detroit, whatever, like there's not a lot of wins in that middle part of the schedule.
Yeah, I like under 8.5 as well, and that's what I wrote up in the guide. One of the things too, when we do the schedule autopsy and we do the schedule analysis here, we always look at the opponents and whatnot, but we don't look at when teams play them and the situations. And I think the situations are really bad for the Colts this year. They get 3 teams off bye weeks, and they also get 2 other teams that get extra prep time against them because they're in Thursday night games. those add up, and those are the little things that are the difference between being an 8-win team or being a 9-win team. Could this team win 9 games? Absolutely.
Sure.
But I just, and you're relying also on Richardson and Taylor staying healthy for 17 games. And look, I think there is a little bit of pressure on Chris Ballard, because Chris Ballard has won 1 playoff game in his tenure since 2014. He didn't really go outside the organization, save for bringing in Raekwon Davis at defensive tackle for Miami for some depth. But, re-signed all the guys, and they must think, okay, well, now we got Anthony healthy, that we're like right there. And I know that they were 1 play away, that errant pass to Tyler Goodson on that 4th and 1 in that winner-take-all game in Week 18 at home that went awry. But I don't think that they're like right there.
Yeah.
I really don't. I still think that they're a little bit away. They're going to be an okay team, but not great, not poor. And I'm a little bit surprised that they didn't get a little aggressive in free agency.
Yeah, I look in because if you're an over better for this team from a win standpoint, then you're eyeballing New England, Denver, and the New York Football Giants. But the problem here, Wes, is we know in the NFL, road games are still road games, right? And so you look at this, and it is going to be a dome team going outdoor to New England on December the 1st, going outdoors to Denver on December the 15th, and then going outdoors in New York on December the 29th. And those are if you are betting over, you got to have two of the 3 of those games, right?
Yes.
I mean, so it is on the road outdoors in the worst part of the weather cycle for a dome team too. So I think, again, as you mentioned, like, you kind of have to dig in a little bit further. Yeah. Do I think that the New England's going to stink? Sure. Do I think Denver's probably going to be, middle of the road, if not worse? Yeah, sure. But it's on the road, and it's going to be bad weather.
Yeah, I agree with that. So it's when you play the certain teams and not what teams you play as well. So, yeah, look, I'm looking Indy now. I don't think this is going to go way under 8.5. I don't think they're going to go like 5-12 or 6-11. But this to me is an 8-9 team. If there's an injury to a Richardson or a Taylor, then it's probably a 7-win team. And I think, for the first time in a few years, we actually have a really clear favorite in this division with the Houston Texans, where it's like, okay, are we going to get our first repeat in several years?
Yeah, it's a team that I'm certainly interested to watch, because, as you said, if everything goes right, you could have a 10-win season. Like, I mean, if everything goes right for this team and Anthony Richardson does kind of take that next step, you could do that. But I'm gonna side there on the under 8.5.